Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
All right, time to bring in our special guest for the night and shift gears, talk about something else, finally. Thank you, Jeremy Pilon-Berlin. Thank you for joining us on the program again tonight. It's great to have you back.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate you having me.
Wow, you have this new documentary out. It's called Failure to Protect. Can you tell our viewers what the subject matter is?
Yeah, of course. So the documentary follows three sets of parents who have all lost their children to Child Protective Services, which is a government agency. And it's a journey where you follow these parents as they try to reunify with their kids that have been placed in foster care. But at the same time, you learn about the child welfare system here in America and some of the injustices that happen. So it was important to tell it from the parents' perspective because I felt like their voices were really being silenced within this system. But at the same time, I wanted it to be emotional and informational so you can kind of understand the bigger policies at play that are affecting everyday people's lives. Right.
So I have this trailer for the documentary. Is it okay if I run that for folks here?
Yeah, please go for
it. Let's do that, and that'll help kind of tee up the conversation. Here we go.
Today just so happens to be the second year that our son's been gone, and we've been in the fight of our life.
This is a legal system that you're going into. If you don't know the rules, you will be chewed up and spit out.
If I could say anything to a mother who just got their children detained, you're in a crisis. Life feels like it's over. The most important thing is regaining custody of your children.
The child welfare system at its core is designed to protect children who need protection. Okay, and that's key, is who need protection.
So social workers, out of fear, will remove more children rather than only remove those children that truly need to be removed.
It's okay. This isn't someone stole your car. Someone broke into your house. This is someone took your child, your flesh and blood.
Were there signs there? Were there no signs? Did I miss them? Did I catch them? At this point, I honestly don't know.
Kids are not safe in Child Protective Services, and they won't give them back to their loving families because they're making money.
My son with special needs has been in 4 different homes. It doesn't seem real.
The difference between the criminal system and the child welfare system is substantial. You have more rights as a criminal than you do as a parent.
Wow, that's powerful.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
What was it, Jeremy, that prompted you to do this work?
Yeah, so my mom actually has been running one of the oldest nonprofit child abuse prevention agencies in America called Parents Anonymous. So it's something that, I've been around my entire life, But one day I was kind of there doing a video for her, and I kind of had parent after parent sort of tell me your story. How did you lose your kids? How did you get to this point? And story after story, it was essentially the same things, the same injustices, the same abuses by the social worker. And these people were kind of the same, very similar circumstances. A lot of them were, African American or Latino, or they were from the lower socioeconomic class. And I kind of left that day just really inspired to try to tell this story from their perspective. And what does it take to prove to the system that you're not this monster that, they're trying to tell you that you are?
But isn't the system supposed to protect children? Why in your estimation is it not working?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of reasons why the system is failing parents and children. The goal of the system obviously is to protect children, but what oftentimes happens is the standards that get used in these juvenile dependency courts are lower standards than our criminal and civil courts in America. And so when an allegation arises, oftentimes kids will be taken from their parents without even speaking to the parent or understanding the full spectrum of the story. And, you know, people get, victimized, in this process. And, unfortunately, the system, the way the money flows, which, in every system, that's always the key indicator of how things work, right? And so within this system, the money flows that the more kids that you put into the system, the more these agencies make. And they're actually incentivized financially $4,000 to $8,000 per child to move kids from foster care to adoption. So instead of using that money, it's actually $30 billion a year annually we spend on the child welfare system to help these families, give them resources, help remedy the problems. They take kids away first and ask questions later. And so if that money was spent giving these families resources, classes, whatever they need, and keeping the kid in the home, we would see a lot better results. Because unfortunately, when kids enter the foster care system, their outcomes are really abysmal, unfortunately. And, likelihood of going to jail, likelihood of being unemployed, all these things skyrocket once you enter the foster care system. So it's also like a liability thing. These judges and social workers are scared, if they return a child and something happens to a child, well, that's their ass, right? And so they prefer to take the kid. And once you're in this system, even if they find out the allegations are incorrect or they're untrue, they're not just going to return the kid tomorrow. This process, I would say, at minimum takes a year to get your kids back. And that's a quick process, I would say.
Wow. Well, we're talking here about the system in the United States, but I think there are many similarities between the U.S. system and the Canadian system. As you know, we're based in Canada, but we have kind of a split audience, U.S. and Canadian.
Yeah, I mean, there was a famous lawsuit, I believe, not even that long ago, a year or two ago, with the Native Americans in Canada. It was a class action lawsuit against your guys' child welfare system, I believe. $30 to $50 billion they were awarded because of the abuses that were happening there. Unfortunately, a lot of the social workers that come into this field are young, don't have a lot of life experience. And when you go into someone's home who comes from a different race, a different religion, a different socioeconomic status, unconscious bias happens a lot. And, a lot of judgment is placed on these families. And oftentimes the social worker who comes to your home and removes your kids is the social worker that's handling your case for that next year. Now, how do you think most parents react when their kids get taken from them? Well, they say some pretty horrible things to these social workers, and they're people too. And so unfortunately, the biggest likelihood of you getting your kids back in this system is whether your social worker likes you or not. And that's not how it's supposed to work. And there's a big dissidence within the system of how it's supposed to work and then how it actually works. And there's a big separation there. And I highlight that at the start of the film. I
would think the problems start with the way that they staff these services. That, you know, it comes down then to the frontline workers.
It does in a sense, and it doesn't in another sense, right? Unfortunately, we're not victimizing all social workers as bad, all social workers is good. This is a definite gray area. Same thing you could say with police, right? But the issue is that even when a social worker recommends that a child be returned to their home, oftentimes their supervisor or their supervisor will tell them no. And if the social worker doesn't abide by that, then they'll get taken off the case. So even when you have those good social workers who are trying to return kids home, they often get pushed aside, unfortunately. And yeah, I think also, in the educational process of it, I think they come into it a little too naive about how things are actually working. And, they have things that they're trying to improve about the system, but at the end of the day, it works how it works, right? And I think these normally young white women come in 25 years old, you come into a 45-year-old woman's house who's got 5 kids, 2 jobs. You don't really understand the stressors that they have on their life. And unfortunately, judgment's passed upon them. And, if you don't say the right thing or do the right thing, that's their stick. The police have a stick, it's a gun. The social worker stick is taking your kids away and holding that carrot over your head.
And can you speak to the demographics that are in play here?
As far as the families?
Yeah. Like
The
who's
families,
affected by this most?
Yeah, the families that get hit by the most is definitely on the lower socioeconomic means. It just kind of depends where you are in our country. But if you're poor, you're very much more likely to get taken because, like, for example, in California, in the juvenile dependency court, over 90% of the attorneys in this court are court-appointed attorneys, and they often have huge caseloads, and they'll see you 2 minutes before your court hearing. I was at court, and actually the social worker came up and she didn't even know the woman's name. She had forgotten her name. And that's her fault, but it's also the fault of the system for overworking these people. And, they tend to be Black or brown are the most hit, societies, racial groups that are hit by this. Very rarely will you see a upper class person in these courtrooms. And if you do, they'll hire a private attorney and they'll probably get their case wrapped up a lot quicker. So yeah, like most things in our society, the lower end of society gets hit the hardest, unfortunately.
What kind of abuses are we talking about here? I would imagine it's everything from sexual abuse to not being
Physical
properly
abuse.
fed because the families maybe don't have the resources in place to deal with properly feeding and clothing their children. Can you speak to all of that?
Yeah, the common abuses are, general neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse happens. And unfortunately with sexual abuse, that usually is, recurrent, a cycle within the family. It happened to your uncle and then, your grandfather and so on. And no one deals with that cycle of abuse. But why the film is called Failure to Protect, actually, it's a statute in the child welfare law. And essentially, if a parent fails to protect their child against abuse or neglect, the social worker can remove the child from the home. But the issue with that law is it's very vague. What is failing to protect, right? I mean, if you didn't know something was happening in your home, is that your fault? Or should you have known? Or, so it gives them a lot of leeway in taking kids much easier. It's almost every person I met on their, allegations, failures to protect is almost always listed. I compare it to sort of resisting arrest in America, right? If you get arrested and you turn your shoulder left, well, you've resisted arrest. It's a very easy thing they slap on there, and it's very common, unfortunately.
I guess your position, the position you've come to through doing this work, is that in most cases, it's in the best interests of the child to leave them in the home, but the system needs to change so that parents have the proper support mechanisms in place so that they can properly care for their children.
Yeah, exactly. And, also why I was really inspired to make this film, Rick, was that there's only one story you really ever hear. If you do hear a child welfare story in the news, or maybe there's been a couple other documentaries, it's the same story. It's the parents' horrible abuse, horrible neglect. The social worker should have stepped in sooner and done something sooner, right? And what I'm not saying those cases don't exist, they obviously do exist out there, but they're not the majority of cases. Those are the minority of cases. Usually it's a couple that has a dispute and one lashes out on the other, or it's an angry kid who, doesn't want to do his homework, or it's the parent made a mistake, sure, but does it rise to the level of needing your kids removed? Maybe they just need a parenting class. Maybe they need some mental health services. Um, so I wanted to tell a more nuanced story, one that is the one that's really affecting the majority of families out there. And I sit out in front of the court and I would talk to family after family, and you just hear the same stories over and over again. And I would just notice in the news, those stories were never reported. They were never touched on those. And that's why I wanted to tell this story, and especially from the parents' perspective.
What were the challenges in telling a story like this? You must have been dealing with confidentiality issues and consent issues and
Yeah,
legal
a lot,
issues,
a
right?
lot, a lot of issues. One interesting thing about the child welfare system and the juvenile dependency courts, which is where the court system that these families are tried in, um, the juvenile dependency court is a closed courtroom. It's not like civil. It's not like criminal. A journalist, a documentary filmmaker, we can't just enter this courtroom. So, um, when you don't have sunlight and you don't have eyes on something, well, abuses happen. They say it's for protecting children, but I would argue having more checks and balances, having more eyes on this system would protect children better, and you would see better results. So that was one difficulty trying to enter the courtroom. Um, I finally actually got entrance to a court hearing, brought a camera crew, everybody. We showed up to the courtroom, we went outside, and then the judge denied me access at the very end. So, but that was like indicative of the system. That was indicative of, you know, they don't have good checks and balances. It's kind of like the police, how the police check and balance them themselves. The system checks and balances on themselves, which isn't a good system. You need a third party to kind of come in there and look at things from an objective standpoint and try to make the most informed decision possible. It's not about he said, she said. It's let's look at all the facts. Let's look at all the information. And, this isn't a one fit all thing. You have to really look at each situation and try to make the best estimation possible. Obviously, it's a difficult process, but when you're not allowing people's voices to be heard, like the parents, I feel like that's a huge failure on the system.
And you are giving at least a few parents an opportunity to have a voice. Uh, was it important for you to sort of tell this story through that kind of lens on a human in a human way by focusing on the personal experiences that some people have had?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the human, aspect of this film is critical. And, the five parents I follow throughout the film, each have unique experiences, come from different backgrounds, but they also have similarities as well, and they experience similar type of things. And so it was just important to, let their voices be heard, because when I kind of come in and speak to them, it's a breath of fresh air, because I actually want to listen to them. I actually want to hear what they have to say. And oftentimes, these social workers, they write these court reports, and that's sort of their whip, is the pencil whipping these parents. And the way that they write them and frame them, it's they take the negatives and they write a list this long, and then they take the positives and they write a list this long, and so it becomes, who are they going to believe, right? The social worker or the parent? Of course they're going to believe the social worker. So when the judge gets this report, it's almost looked at like it's fact, unfortunately. And so they don't understand the backstory, they don't understand all the information, and abuses happen, unfortunately.
So you highlight the problems. You tell this, you share some personal stories, or some people share their personal stories through you, through your work. Are there any suggested solutions that we're going to be, through this?
I don't want to like put out like this is what needs to happen. I like to, this documentary is about, let's give you all the information and let's let the audience make the most informed decisions and opinions they can. And I try to be as unbiased as possible. So, you hear from social workers, you hear from their perspective of things. And it's not easy for them either. They get massive caseloads, they're overworked, underpaid, they're human beings too, right? And then you hear from the parents, then you hear from the judges, you hear from the attorneys, and you try to get a full spectrum of this system and realize what's not working within it. But I think a couple of the huge problems, I highlighted the closed courtroom, but another one is hearsay is allowed in these courtrooms. And as one of my civil rights attorneys says in the film, if you allow hearsay into a court proceeding, you've bastardized the court proceeding. And I fully agree with that. And the issue is a social worker can use hearsay to take a child away from a parent, but a parent can't use hearsay to defend themselves. So it becomes an unfair advantage for them from the get-go. And I think also just, the checks and the balances, the training, and, those are huge things that can change. And I highlighted it earlier, but the money, right? We all know the money is the root of all evil, and how the money flows is how the system's going to work. So the system is built on once kids are in foster care. So all the money is allocated to once they're in the system, not about trying to keep them out of the system and get them the resources and help they need. And so I think those are some of the key issues. And those are throughout the country. These families are based in California that I filmed, but the issues that I talk about within the film are nationwide. Each state, each county has different, specific policies, but essentially they work all very similar. And there's a lot of the same issues occur.
And usually you hear there's inadequate funding for this government program, but it isn't just a matter of funding levels. It's how the money is spent.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's an inadequate funding thing at all. I think it's just how it's spent and how it's utilized. You know what I mean? If we took this money and we rerouted it in a totally different direction, you would see a completely different system at play. And yeah, I think that's really the key to it, unfortunately.
In addition to that, we've seen over decades real cultural changes as well. There's changes in the way families are structured. Mm-hmm. Is that having an impact?
I think so. I think family dynamics are different and unique to each family, right? And the need for specificity, right, I think is really key, and really honing in on this specific family, their specific circumstances, and tailoring the needs and the wants of that family is key. And I think the system kind of does a one size fits all type of thing. And like you said, as families change, as dynamics are changing in America and all across the world, it needs to have more flexibility and to really fit the needs of each of those families instead of, just trying to just put them into a box.
And then you also have, and you've already touched on this, economic issues, unemployment.
Yeah, unemployment obviously plays a big part. And I touch on it in the film, is that the system really struggles to differentiate between poverty and neglect. And there is a difference. And there's a statute in there that says, just because you're poor, even if you're homeless, isn't a reason to take children away. But what oftentimes happens is if your kids get removed, and let's say you become homeless, well, they're not going to return your kids to you now because you're homeless, right? And you can't get a job, or you can't pay your rent. And we know with the prices of everything skyrocketing and wages staying stagnant, I mean, it's harder and harder to just put a roof over a family's head and feed them. So it struggles to deal with those economic issues that affect, so many people around the world.
And I would imagine immigration is a challenge as well, because now you have many people with many different languages, and the social workers. Uh, are there adequate resources in place for communications to be
Yeah,
happening and
yeah.
things like that? Yeah.
I think the communication isn't really an issue per se. I think, here in California, there's obviously a lot of Latinos, so there's plenty of social workers who speak Spanish, and they will do that. I don't think they're gonna, I haven't seen a case like that where they couldn't even communicate with them.
Well, I just
They'll
know here,
find.
like in Canada, for instance, in the school systems, I've heard some teachers have so many kids with, we have so many people from all over the world. You can't speak all the languages, especially in the elementary grades. You get someone even in high school coming in and they don't speak English. So it can be a challenge. So I was just kind of curious about it.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen anything to that regard. But like you said, families are changing, dynamics are changing, which is great, but we just need our systems to reflect those, and be able to be flexible and adjust and not be so rigid in their thinking or in their policies.
So who else worked on this project with you?
Well, I did a lot of the work myself. This was
Okay.
a self-financed project, but I had a great cinematographer, dear friend of mine, Evan Parquette. Had a great composer, Lucas Santiago Cantor, great sound designer, Mike Moding. And some of the people within the film were actually really helpful in just getting me into the system and helping get me access and resources. One woman in the film, Melinda Murphy, she was a social worker for 10 years, quit that, then became a social work advocate for parents who enter the system. And she actually wrote a really great tell-all book about the system, which kind of blows the whistle on the Department of Children and Family Services, called Culture of Fear. And I'd read that book and it was a big inspiration for me. So she was very beneficial in just connecting with people. And also one of the attorneys, Robert Powell, who works in civil rights litigation, because what we've seen is the only time the system makes changes is when you sue them. When you sue them, and there are a lot of civil lawsuits against this child welfare system in the country. And I have a couple civil rights attorneys who that's their career, is suing different county and state agencies. So yeah, I was lucky to have a great team of people in support, and it got distribution through Porter and Craig Film and Media, and now it's available on Amazon, and on demand, which is great.
Yeah. Now I have to say, I wasn't able to watch the film because it's geo-blocked here in Canada. It's not available. I went to
It's not
go.
available in Canada. Oh,
No,
okay.
because we
I
have
thought it was.
Amazon.ca and you have to get it on Amazon.com, just to make you aware. So I think if you could probably get it on Amazon.ca and then it would probably be available here. But when I went to get it today, it wasn't available. It is available through Spectrum as well in the US. I didn't try that, so I don't know if that's geo blocked. Is there any other place where you can download it or watch it at this point, or just those two places?
Right now, it's just on demand at Amazon. It's supposed to be on Canada and the UK. So thank you for telling me that, Rick. I will call the distributor and try to get that rectified, because that should not be correct. It should be available there, but hoping it will become available in more places as it progresses. It'll probably be on Apple Movies and Vudu as time goes on. But just happy to have it out there in the world. It took me almost 3 years to make, so it's
Wow.
it's a journey to make the independent films. So I'm happy that it's just out there at this point.
Well, I could see from just the trailer that it's extremely well produced. Very the videography is exceptional. The,
Thank
the
you.
the music is excellent as well. The subject matter also very engaging. It's timely as well. There seems to be a lot of interest right now around the topic of child welfare. Why do you think why is that in your estimation?
Well, one other thing I really liked about this subject matter, Rick, was, in a lot of hot button issues, right? You can always put the right on one side and the left on the other normally. And I really liked this topic because I found that no matter what side of the political spectrum you were on, a lot of people agree with the issues at hand, whether it was too much government intervention or whether it was racism against, Black or brown families or, poor people getting hit harder. I think a lot of people, no matter what your political leanings may be, kind of all agree about the key elements of the system not working and not working to protect children and protect families. And I thought it's a nice bridge where people can kind of look at something objectively and come together on an issue.
That was kind of my next question too, is how does politics play into this? Is the system struggling because politicians are misguided, or have they tried to score political points that in ways that have hurt the system? What are we looking at here?
Well, I would say the system really changed in 1997 with the Adoptions and Safe Families Act. And this was actually championed by Hillary Clinton, who was the first lady at the time. And the act, like I would say a lot of things in politics, it had good intentions, right? The intention was a lot of kids were sort of languishing in foster care, right? They couldn't go home to their parents, but the foster care parents weren't like a full-time replacement either. And so you would get kids that would just languish in the system till they were 18, and then you set them free, and the results weren't very good. So there was this big push for adoption. How can we get kids to adoption? And then we put this financial incentive in there. County agencies get paid $4,000 to $8,000 per child. They move from foster care to adoption. And that's back to the money, right? Now we're incentivizing agencies to take kids away and then adopt them out. Right. And if you got a cute little bundly baby, they want to adopt that kid out. And in the film, we mentioned if your kid is under the age of 3, you have 6 months to remediate the issue. Now, if your kid is older than the age of 3, you have 12 months to remediate the issue. Now, you ask yourself, well, why is that difference there? The difference is simple. People want to adopt cute little babies. They don't want to adopt a 15-year-old with a bunch of behavioral issues, right? So, that's a key problem within the system, I would say.
Yeah. Jeremy, is there anything else you'd like to add, or any area that you think we should explore that I might have missed?
No, I think, what I'll end on is that, this film is meant to lay the information out there intellectually and emotionally. I want people to try to sit in other people's shoes and instead of judge them. I think in America and all around the world, we really do judge parents, how you were raised compared to how I was raised. We have these unconscious biases. Oh, you should be doing this with your kid, or you should be doing that. But I wanted to kind of break down those barriers and try to let the audience in to other people's shoes and try to have some empathy for them and what they might be going through and understand that the bigger things at play here. So you have that emotional aspect, then you have that understanding of how this system works and how it's affecting these everyday people.
And you've done a lot of other work. Do you have a website or a social media that you'd like to direct people to?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is sorted, SORTED, cilantro at 24 on Instagram. And you can find Failure to Protect at Failure to Protect on Instagram as well. And yeah, I'm currently working in true crime right now. I'm in Kentucky doing a show for Discovery Channel called Murder in the Heartland. So, I love telling, stories that affect everyday people and that have, social impact as well.
Tell me the name of that Instagram account again, and I'll put it up on the screen here.
SORTED_cilantro24. And that's because my production company is Sorted Pictures. My favorite herb is cilantro, and my lucky number is 24. So,
sorry, sorted_cilantro, SOLO.
SORTED_CILANTRO 24. Sorted cilantro.
I still don't think I got it right.
I could write
cilantro.
Let me just write it in the chat for you here. No, no, no.
No, I'm way off base, right? Okay.
Yeah, you're way off here. I'm going to write it in the chat for you right now.
Excellent. In the private chat there? There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll copy and paste that into the banner. Sorry about that. Hang on. That's wrong. This will be right. Here we go.
Okay.
There it is. Sorted _ cilantro. Oh, of course, not an S, to C. 24.
It's all good. And thank you for telling me about the Canada thing. I'll rectify that and let you know when that, because that should be available in Canada and the UK as well.
I'll tell you, a lot of people up here will, especially within our audience, will want to watch your documentary. I just know because we just had a Million March for Children event few weeks ago, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, another one coming up on the 21st. Of course, it's just top of mind for people, these issues surrounding children. So I know that a lot of people will want to view your work.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on, Rick.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. A privilege as always, and hope to have you back again soon.
Okay. My pleasure.
All right. Take care. There you have it, folks. So let me take another quick break here. We'll come back with more stuff, more news on the other side of this.
Maverick News. The world is watching.